Hi everyone, today we're going to be making traditional scones with jam and cream. A really great recipe to have up your sleeve when you've got visitors come in and maybe nothing in your cupboard and you can just whip these up. But remember, before we begin, we have to wash our hands, tie our hair up, put on an apron and get all ingredients out. So let's get started. The next thing to do is turn on your oven to 220 degrees, and I've also collected clean tea towels, and I have everything out that I'm going to need ready to start. So first thing, start measuring out. First of all, you need 2 cups of flour. So dip your 1 cup measurement in, make sure it's overflowing, tap the top of the cup, scrape off the excess and into your bowl and sift up. Because you need 2 cups, you do that twice. You also need 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and that can go straight into the flour. And then we sift the flour. Sifting the flour aerates the flour, removes the lumps, and will make your scones nice and light and fluffy. Next, you need 20 grams of butter. If you don't have scales to weigh this out, you can just use a tablespoon. It's roughly a tablespoon. The butter goes directly into the flour, and what we're going to do is called the rubbing in method. So make sure your hands are clean and you literally just lift and squeeze the butter through the flour. While I'm doing this, I like to lift it up semi-high so that it helps continue to aerate that flour. And I spin the bowl and really try and get right down into the bottom of the bowl so that all the flour gets some butter on it. This process takes a couple of minutes, but as soon as you feel no more lumps, then you can stop. The next ingredient you need is 250 ml of milk. Always measure liquid ingredients in a liquid measuring jug, not in one of these flat cups. Okay, it's a lot more accurate. These cups also measure out slightly different, because if you want to measure out a full cup, you have to do it right to the brim, then you can spill it, but it also doesn't measure out the same. So a liquid measuring jug is best for this. If you don't have one of these, then I guess this is the next best thing. Okay, this gets tipped in all at once to the flour and butter and salt mixture, and then use a butter knife to just combine the wet ingredients into the dry ingredients. Now you don't want to overmix it, you just want it to come together into a dough. Once it looks like that, you can tip it onto the bench. If it's really sticky, you might need to put a little bit of extra flour on the bench. If it's not too bad, then it might be okay, but I suggest a little bit of flour on the bench would be good. Just put a bit of extra flour into this cup measurement and then you can just sprinkle it down. So tip your dough onto the bench. If you've got a scraper, plastic scraper, it's really good to scrape out as much as you can. Bring the dough together. Again, if it's sticky at this stage, you can just sprinkle a little bit of extra flour on top. Don't put your hands on a sticky dough, it'll just get really messy. Okay, then we fold it 10 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Remember, if it's feeling sticky, just stop, sprinkle a bit more. 7, 8, 9, 10. Make sure you stop after you've done 10. If you over knead this dough, it'll become tough and your scones won't turn out all that great. So 10 times only, and then you need to stop. Also have a baking tray with some baking paper on top ready to go as well. Now, just to flatten out the dough, just with your hands, till it's about a 2 centimetre thickness. Now also, I've just washed my hands. So remember, whenever you're cooking, you wash your hands, not just at the beginning, but throughout the whole process. If your dough is sticky, you can just put your cutter into the flour. Now, if you don't have a cutter, you can use a glass, an upside down glass with a sort of a sharpish rim on it. Or you could just cut them into squares. When you've cut out one lot, bring it together. And again, just don't over knead it, just bring it together lightly, couple of folds. Always end your fold with the nice smooth side facing up. Squish it down again with your hands. A bit more flour on top if it's sticky. Cut them out. You don't have to have a shaped cutter either. This is just what I have in my drawer. Round, square, whatever you've got. Bring this next one back together again. Again, be careful not to over knead it. I could just make this into one big one by itself and just shape it. Actually, I'll just do that. This one can just be a nice round one. And onto the tray. Next thing we need to do is glaze them with a little bit of milk. The other important thing to not do is never put your tray onto a dirty floured bench. So wipe that clean before you put this down on anything. The best way to clean up a floury bench is if you have some form of scraper. You can just scrape it all together into a pile and then into your hands and into the bin. Don't put it down the sink. Flour and water makes glue. And then wipe it down, ready to do the next stage. Okay, I've put a little bit of milk in here and I'm just going to glaze the top of the scones with the milk. This will help the scones go a really nice golden brown colour. Now just before I go and put these in the oven, just check the thickness of these. So these need to be 1.5 to 2 centimetres thick when you're cutting them out. If you make them too thin, then they'll be really small. You're looking to, these will rise and you want them to be a nice high scone. So make sure when you're rolling it out that you don't do it too thin. These are now ready to go into the oven and they are going to take 12 to 15 minutes. Just make sure you set your timer and keep track of how long they're in there for. Okay, so now it's time to whip the cream while they're in the oven. The recipe says to use 1/2 cup of cream for whipping. I'm just going to use whatever I've got left in here. So I'm just going to pour that in. And if you do it directly into like a small jug like this, it whips up within about a minute. So it's really quick. Keep an eye on it though. You don't want to make it into butter. So as soon as it starts to look thick and creamy and like it's whipped, you need to stop straight away. Okay? It's starting to get quite thick, but it's not quite ready yet. So it's only going to need about 10 or 15 more seconds. When you can see it's starting to thicken, then slow it right down and do those last 10 or 15 seconds on a lower speed. Mine have now come out the oven and you can see they have risen quite well, so they're really nice and light and fluffy. I'm making myself a nice cup of tea and I have a nice plate to present them on so that they look really good. I'll now serve it up. Okay, so in the inside they should look really nice and fluffy. I'm going to use some of my mum's homemade jam. Now there's always a bit of a conversation about whether the jam or the cream goes first, but in my opinion, definitely the jam goes first. So spread that on. You can use any jam you like, raspberry, strawberry, apricot, whatever you have. And then some cream on top. Keep the cream really light and fluffy. And there we have homemade scones with jam and cream and a beautiful cup of tea to go with it. I reckon if you serve that up to your parents today, they will absolutely love it. Now stay tuned because I'm going to show you another way that you can use a scone dough to make a different type of scone. This next scone dough is going to be used to make a swirly scone. Now I've made up the dough already, exactly the same recipe as before. put it on a floured surface, and this time you're going to need a rolling pin. I have a little bit of extra flour handy in case it's sticky, and I want to roll this out into a rectangular shape. Now what we're going to use today is we're going to use some cinnamon, sugar and butter to make like a cinnamon scroll. You could do exactly the same thing if you wanted to make little pizza scrolls. You could use the scone dough, and you could use bacon, cheese, you could do pineapple, tomato paste, whatever you like. For this one, you need it to be pretty thin, and if it goes out of shape, you can just wriggle around with it with your hands to shape it how you want it. So it looks like that. For the ingredients, what we're needing is 20 grams of butter. Room temperature is best. Tablespoon of flour, I've already measured these out. 2 teaspoons of cinnamon and 1/3 cup of sugar. And we're going to just rub these in using the rubbing in method like we did earlier when we rubbed the butter into the flour. This is just going to take me a few minutes, so I'll pause the recording and come back to you when it's done. Okay, so this is all mixed together now. I'm just going to place it all on the scone dough, spread it out. And we'll roll this up. Just can push the ends in a little bit as you come to that, and then make sure the seam ends up on the bottom. And then I'll just bunch it up so that it's kind of the same thickness all the way along. Transfer it onto a chopping board, and then we're going to cut it up. I usually just go in half first, and then in half, and then into thirds. Then transfer these onto a baking tray, and we brush them with milk, and then into the oven. These will also take about 12 to 15 minutes in the oven. My first batch took only 12 minutes, so it just depends on your oven. Keep an eye on it, set your timer for 12 minutes and check them, and then if they need longer, then you can put them back in. So the cinnamon swirly scones have just come out of the oven, and they smell and look amazing for a bit of a sweet treat. And you can just transfer them again off the tray and onto a nice serving plate, and have a really lovely afternoon tea for visitors. Quick and easy. Okay, so we have scones 2 ways. Traditional jam and cream, which look absolutely amazing and you can never go wrong, or we have the swirly scones. Make sure you clean up while you're cooking and keep it tidy as you go, and then when you serve it up, everyone at the end of the day will be happy. Have a great day, everyone, and happy cooking.